So that is the role of the scholar, is to come out and create that tension so that it just doesn't end up being this horrific world of total corruption, that there is a tension and wrongs are redressed. It might take time. It might not always happen, but there's always those people. And that's one of the beauties of the world. You find these funny people in these strange places that are holding up this standard because of something that they perceive as a wrong, and they take it on as their life's work. Somebody who defends some Aboriginal people in the middle of the rainforest because loggers are going in there and he's willing to give up his life for that. I mean, where does that person come from? That comes from Allah. You know, that person, whatever's in that heart of that person, that was put in there by Allah. And that is one of the ways that the world maintains this tension between the real and the ideal, what we desire and what we actually experience. If you lose the ideal in your worldview, it's nihilism. And then you end up having the worst types of peoples and societies. It's total decadence and total corruption. It's gone. It's over. And then usually very terrible things happen in those societies. They completely disintegrate, and then they end up either being renewed by the disintegration, which occurs when another people invade them and stir up everything and bring them back. I mean, this is Sunnah of Allah. Ibn Khaldun, who the Arabs hated because he told the truth. I mean, he was really somebody that was ignored for centuries in the Muslim world. It was the Westerners that actually realized his greatness, and that's the truth. And he suffered during his lifetime because all he was doing was saying, look at yourselves. He was showing them the reality of their societies. He was also putting a foundation for behavior that nobody had done before. I mean, he says, you complain about the Jews being the way they are. Well, treat anybody like you treat them and see how they behave. And that's what he said. You treat people like they're being treated and then see how they behave. And it's the same with African American in this country. People complain. You've got all these people that are complaining out there. Well, treat people like that and then see how they behave. Because usually those things that people do end up being strategies. And this is why women also, you look in the Quran, and this is something Muslims totally misunderstand. You know, there's a verse in the Quran, إِنَّ كَيْدُكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ, that your plot is very vast, it's intricate. And the Arabs will use that to say, like, you know, this is women's nature. Well, look what the commentators say. You know what they say? That when you oppress people, when you take away the rights of people, they end up going to trickery and to machinations to get what they want because they can't get them the way you get them, right? I mean, that's what that means, because those women were living in a Jahili culture. That wasn't a society that is praiseworthy. And that Allah didn't say that. That's what the Egyptians said. Do you see? I mean, it's Allah recorded it in His book. But when Allah is quoting a non-Muslim in the Quran, it doesn't mean that that's the truth. And that's why when Sabah, the queen of Sheba, says, إِنَّ الْمُلُوكِ إِذَا دَخَلُوا قَرْيَةً أَفْسَدُوهَا, when kings come into a city, they destroy it and they make the high people low. Allah says immediately, وَكَذَلِكَ هُمْ يَفْعَلُونَ, and they do that. Allah says that, not Sheba. In other words, Allah confirms what she was saying. Because it might not necessarily be true. That's her remark. That's what happens. If you treat people certain ways, you get certain human behaviors because human beings have the same mechanisms working. We're not different. And that's the message of the Merchant of Venice. Right? That's what Shylock says to him. You know, he's asking, why do you want this piece of flesh? I mean, what good is it? And Shylock just looks at him and he says, he mocks my religion, makes fun of me, laughs at my losses, is angry and envious about my gains. Right? I mean, this is what he does to me. This is how he spits on me, treats me like this. And he says, am I any different from you? Don't I have organs, hands, dimensions, all these things just like you? You poison us, we die. Tickle us, we'll laugh. Just like you, aren't we? Well, what do you do when people do cruel things to you? You want revenge. And then he says, are we any different than you in that? If you harm us, don't we want revenge too? I mean, it's not a spiritual response because revenge is negative. But his point is, look, you do it, and then you teach us the same thing, and you expect us to respond with Christian charity when there's no Christian charity here. So that's the message. You treat people a certain way, and you'll get certain responses. So these verses are about how you treat women. It's not permissible for you to force them, karahan, to give you their wealth. It's not permissible for you, if their husbands or their fathers die, to abuse them because they no longer have a male protector, right? Because they're often in compromised positions. And what's the next word? وَلَا تَعْضُرُهُنَّ, right? And don't constrict them. And don't prevent them. لِتَذْهَبُوا بِبَعْضِ مَا آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ, in order that you can get something that you want, that you've given them, which refers to a dowry. But look at the word, وَلَا تَعْضُرُهُنَّ. The word ta'aduru means to ضَيِّقُ, to put constraint on it. But the root word is related to muscles. The adala is your muscle. So it's like, don't use this power that you have to oppress this person. Right? Don't do that. And in the other verse, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says Allah is over you. In other words, you think because you're over this person, you can oppress them? Well, here's some news. مَا أَتَيْتُمُهُنَّ إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِينَ بِفَاحِشَةٍ, unless they do something fahisha mubayyina, right? Unless there's a clear fahisha. Now, the ulama differ on what that means. Fahisha mubayyina, there's two opinions. One is that it's nushuz, which is, there's a perfect word for it, which unfortunately is not used very much. I mean, I use recalcitrance, but there's actually a better word. I mean, it's still considered a usable word, but it's contumely. C-O-N-T-U-M-E-L-Y. And contumely is almost identical to nushuz, because it means to harm or humiliate somebody with deed or word. But it comes from a root word in Latin, which means to swell up. So we get tumor from that as well. So it has to do with pride. And that's why in Shakespeare, in Hamlet, he mentions that, the proud's contumely. In Shakespeare, in Hamlet's soliloquy, he talks about the proud man's, this swelling pride that he has that causes him to be cruel to other people. And that's what nushuz is, because neshaza means to rise up, to elevate yourself over somebody else. And a man can do it to a woman, and a woman can do it to a man. So some have interpreted it to mean that. Others have said, no, it means zina, and when it says, إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِينَ بِفَاحِشَةٍ مُبَيِّنَةٍ, unless they commit an act of adultery with 4 witnesses. That's what mubayyina means. There's no ambiguity here. But either way, even if it's nushuz, it has to be mubayyina. It can't be something you think is nushuz. I don't like the way she talks to me. In other words, this better be clear to everybody. When you determine what nushuz is, there has to be a universal standard on what that is, and that's based on the Sharia. I mean, that's based on those things, which I covered already. And then it says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and then live with them bil-ma'ruf. Now, the beauty of that word, bin ma'ruf, I mean, Allah doesn't go into details because, one, healthy people should know what a good way of living was. So how do you do unto others as you would have others do unto you is a pretty good rule. Is how do you like to be treated? Well, treat other people like that. So, ashiruhunna, live with them the way you want them to live with you. Treat them with dignity, treat them with care and concern, treat them with love, treat them with compassion, with empathy, all these things, right?